I would definitely go along with the Chick-fil-A tie-in.
Well, you can do that here because we are live on YouTube. It's Thursday night. It's Thursday night. I am Matt Reese. This is the Mattriarchy. This is my Thursday night thing, my regular Thursday night thing. And I don't have a regular Saturday night thing. I don't. I just do whatever comes to mind. Yeah. Okay, guys, how's it going?
Great content.
Wow, off to a great start.
Well, I figured if I was going to drop a reference to Roadhouse, I ought to make it as weird as possible.
You got to stop.
Drop straight through the floor. I don't think any of us picked that one up.
No, yeah, because I'm not 80 and I haven't seen that movie.
Well, I mean, I haven't seen that movie since 1993.
I just watched it again last year. It's great with jokes.
I mean, admittedly, it does have some good actors. What's his face who plays the old guy?
Sam Elliott.
Sam Elliott, an amazing actor. I really enjoy him in almost everything I've seen him in.
It's not necessarily his best role, though.
Doesn't he play the same character every time?
Yeah.
Okay.
But not necessarily. Yeah. Oh, hey, Dave picked up on it right there.
Oh,
check that out. Way to go, Dave. Dave in the chat.
My favorite film, I grew up on Prancer. I don't know about you guys. Somehow that was always in the VHS player.
Wow. That's
a little obscure, but
I feel the need to delve deeply into this. It's not the point of the show, but there's stuff to be discussed about that.
It must have been in the dollar bin or something, and that's why we had it. But it was, there's some quality there. I don't know. It's very underrated.
So my childhood holiday movie memory is the Blues Brothers movie played every Thanksgiving when I went over to my uncle's house.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So I grew up on the classics. So let's see, Son of Godzilla, Godzilla versus the Sea Monster, Godzilla 1985.
Nice. So wait, are you trying to plug HBO Max right now? Because I mean, you can watch all those things on HBO Max right now. I think.
Can you? Okay.
This is so fun. These are three of my favorite people.
It's a great show. I'll tell you what.
Or slightly, you guys are all smarter than the average streamer, which is nice. So we'll see if we can keep that going.
I will do my best to drag that average down.
Yeah, that's my job.
So. Well,
that is not true. I found something out about you today, Matt, because I saw something.
Oh no.
There was a social media post. I was looking into you for some reason, probably because we're supposed to be talking about your book, and you work in education, don't you?
Oh no, not at all.
I thought I saw something that said that you were grading papers or something, or working with students, or something you were alluding to that made it sound like you were grading.
Really?
Like grading assignments.
I don't think that was me.
Okay. Well.
There's a lot of maths. I mean, if you're talking to someone in their 30s, there's a 1 in 5 chance their name is Matt.
Okay, well then I've completely invented this fan fiction in my head, in an alternate universe where you're a history professor.
It's the Berenstain Matt.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to go back to school to teach and to do education. My dad does that, and my wife convinced me that I should go into something that has a better job placement level, which is art. So I'm doing that instead.
Do you teach art?
No, like doing art. I can find a job faster. And
you're actually good at art, so you don't have to teach it.
Well.
Okay.
In the Philly area, winter holiday equals Rocky Marathon. Yeah, I can imagine that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay, sorry, Matt. I interrupted your intro with my poorly written fan fiction of Matt Krotz being a teacher.
I would love to know. I'm actually super curious to know what that post was that you got wrong or whatever.
I have no idea. At this point, it might have just been a fever dream. I have no idea.
Well, you're in the white hot magma core of grading yourself. I'm assuming. So you probably.
I just got out of it, so maybe my brain melted, and because there's a point when you're grading your 14th proposal essay that's like 2,000 words long, that your brain just turns to mush. So then you start seeing things. I guess that's what happened.
Yeah.
So wait, you're a teacher though.
I work in education. I like to say that because once I start saying that I'm a teacher, people think I know what I'm talking about, and that comes with a lot of expectations I cannot meet.
Well, I mean,
See, I actually kind of feel exactly the opposite. So
yeah.
I'm an exceptionally biased homeschool parent. There are reasons for that.
I am a product of gifted education systems.
That sounds like a very diplomatic way of saying I hated school.
That's great.
No, like
Yeah.
I in Sarasota we have a exceptional student education program called the Pineview School for Gifted, and I went there and I was a very typical student in the fact that I burned out under the pressure and didn't know how to handle it, and wish I'd learned the fundamentals of how to properly discipline myself in school. But I wasn't one of the cool people who, like my buddy Mike Riccio, who was on certain substances, and since it's far enough along, one of those substances is being an LSD, and he got his perfect 1600 on his SATs while tripping out on LSD.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
So that's the education I got in high school.
Great.
That seems fairly appropriate, honestly.
Larry, I can see you skipping class to run out to Lido Beach or something.
I actually
Throw
skipped
rocks at
class
the raccoons.
only once, and that was to go to a Jeb Bush rally, because anybody who signed up to go to the Jeb Bush rally got to leave, but they were supposed to come back, but we all made it an unofficial skip day.
Was that when he was governor?
That was when he was running for governor the first time. He didn't win. He lost to Lawton Childs.
Mm-hmm.
Jeb Bush has never lost anything in his life. You are making this up, or I'm hallucinating history again.
Please clap.
Oh, good gravy! That's marvelous. It's perfect. It's
This
perfect.
is so great. Bring in the puppets. This is awesome.
I wish I had a puppet show, but I don't.
I can't. I think they're okay in small doses, but when you have when you have an hour long or longer stream and you've got someone on a puppet, I don't know.
I mean, I've never watched Donald do a puppet stream, so I don't know how that works out.
I mean, there were shows with 3 puppets on at once now, and it's too.
Yeah, I can't handle that.
Yeah.
Because you watch K-Log, right? I've seen you like in the chat of that because it's a Berserk.
Oh yeah.
The blue one, yeah. Goodness gracious, I can watch about 5 minutes of that, and I go, oh, I've got some ironing to do.
Oh, you can't do Zerg? Yeah. It's cute. Like I thought it'd be up your alley. I mean, maybe he's not very dark. He's very PG-13,
Right. Yeah.
So.
Again, I think it's just the voice of it. When you have a voice, it's like a war voice like this or whatever, and I'm like, I can handle that in short doses, but over a longer period of time, I just start.
Can we? That's a nice segue. It's okay. I'd like to hear you guys' thoughts on this because we've all done campaigns now to some extent, and I like this idea of like it doesn't have to be puppets, but launching a campaign like the guy behind Zerg is doing, like Cider Hype, but having an online personality that isn't you, that's very separate, but somehow you can tie him in. You can draw people in with the entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
You can make them the tacos, as I like to say, of just like YouTube free entertainment comedy stuff, and then you sell them on the once they like your tacos, then you sell them on the hot dog of your.
So kind of like a Lemony Snicket type thing with like a series of unfortunate events where you create a character or something.
Well, I mean, you're wanting to kayfabe this up, right? You're wanting to kayfabe, make a little bit of a professional wrestling gimmick kind of personality. You sell people on the energy and gimmick, and then boom, here's a comic book.
Well, he goes. I love that, and that's tried and true. He goes farther by Cider's making the comic, but then he's going to be selling Zurg original art that's signed by Zurg and all this stuff. So there's really like two characters now that are both.
So he's kind of like going. He's kind of like going fully Gwar about how he's doing the whole deal.
Yeah, is that the guy? I'm trying to remember. I was going to go with a King reference.
They're a punk rock band that have like all sorts of like kind of a Muppet kind of
I'm not sure you could call Gwar punk per se. They're definitely like punk adjacent, but in the same way that like heavy metal is punk adjacent.
Yeah, but their absurdity in trying to mock things is kind of punk, and how they kind of are offensive. That's the point. Is kind of punk. They're more punk adjacent than heavy metal.
Well,
and they're definitely more punk adjacent than Green Day.
Well, okay, yeah. I can give you some of that, but it's like I don't know.
Yeah, but it's interesting. So, Twitless, how is your? Are you getting pre-orders now?
So I'm actually still waiting for. So I have the book at Kablam. And I'm basically just waiting for it to get listed on Indie Planet. But it's interesting because I think someone had mentioned to me, it might have been you. I might be hallucinating this again. I'm just hallucinating all sorts of alternate histories where I just say this happened, right? And then there's no, it didn't.
In Twitless's mind, Matt apparently is like consistently existing and no one else sees him.
But someone told me that Kablam was like really far behind. And that was kind of an issue with working with them. And so when it came to actually getting physical product to me, they're not behind. But I think that they're putting all their efforts into getting physical products out. So if you order from them, like even me ordering my own book, it was like a week to get to me. So that really wasn't a problem. But if you list it with Indie Planet, it takes like 6 to 8 weeks for it to end up on the platform. So they're putting all their efforts into getting just like physical products out. And then it's taking a while to get stuff listed on the online web platform. So I'm just basically just sitting in the queue waiting for it to show up.
I think that was probably me because I had been talking to Brian Ball and he had mentioned that they were they had some problems in the middle of the pandemic.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah,
because they had like some staffing issues and some equipment issues and all that kind of stuff. But that was a year ago almost now. So
yeah, it took them like 2.5 weeks to get me 3 example copies of Wild Tales. So, and that was unusual because I've ordered with them before and it just took a couple days. So I knew something was up.
Yeah, they're usually quite good, or in my experience, just getting a couple orders from them, it seemed to go pretty quickly. But then, like I said, the online platform, little slower. But as soon as it shows up on Indie Planet, I'm going to start, and now that I'm done with my semester too, I can kind of start, trying to learn how to market the darn thing.
Really shilling and stuff. Yeah, it's cool to see you on Oz. I'm sure he'll give you a push and.
I was on Oz for the first time in like 2 years, and
2 years. Come on.
Well, that's not.
You are in a fever
dream. Fine, a year. I can't count.
It's probably been a year. It's probably been a year.
Probably been 6 months.
Actually, that's probably more accurate.
Well, I don't know. I quit. I guess I'm not the guy to say because I quit paying attention to Oz, fairly quickly. So
2 years ago, when I was on the Oz show, I feel like
it feels like 2 years. It's a different landscape now.
I need to do that Titanic theme. It's been 87 years or whatever she says.
Oh gosh.
I love how you say that, and Matt's immediate response is just like, "Oh, can't somebody just kill me? Can I pay to have that done?"
Near, far.
It does feel like hell sometimes, keeping abreast of all this.
Or you can just not keep abreast of it.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's important to keep track of your own history. And if that history involves, people making dildo memes of your face because you told them they were wrong online, then I think it's important to remember that.
Well, I mean, I personally am all about the oral history of the internet. It's one of my personal favorite things. And
emphasis on the oral.
Okay, I was going to say, you set yourself up for that.
Well, I mean, these things haven't really fit into a way that's really more of a structured history. It's more of like, you're telling the stories.
Would
It's
they
like
fit?
Tales from the
Would they,
Internet.
would they fit if certain things expanded or contracted? I'm sorry. I'm my brain. I'm sorry.
Damn it, Twitless.
Yeah.
I would like to remind everybody that my channel is mentioned as being not for kids.
I am not myself today. Hello, how are you? Nice to meet you. My name's Twitless, and
But you know what is for kids? One of Matt's latest ideas for marketing: making single-run cereals with toys inside.
Yeah.
As a promotional idea, which I think is exceptionally clever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about marketing to kids because I don't know. It's like when it comes to online sales, it's you got to market to the parent who wants to buy something for the kid, and that's tricky.
Yeah, the other thing I've learned because some of the reading I was doing this semester was pretty pertinent to comic books and children's literature. And so the big eye-opening lesson that I learned was about how powerful the children's librarians were, historically speaking. Because back in the day,
that Caldecott medal has done more to injure comic books than Wortham's ever given credit for.
Yeah, the reading I've been doing was specifically around that very scene. It was Anne Carroll Moore, I think. She was the children's librarian at the New York Library, and she was like the mafia don of children's lit for like decades. And she hated comic books, and a lot of people of her ilk hated comics. But that's when comics were winning the war, so to speak. They were being a book I read said that they were selling like 2 million copies a month. Meanwhile, they couldn't get their award-winning children's picture books to sell, a pittance of that. But over time, the roles have reversed, and the gatekeeping that children's librarians and the power they have is immense. That's one of the main reasons why Raina Telgemeier and Jeff Smith's Bone have been such international or national sensations. The reason why they sell they've sold so well, the librarians took up the cause. They really liked Bone. They really like, Smile. And those books are just, everywhere.
In fairness, it's really hard to not like Bone. It's really good.
No, it is. But I think it might have been, if it hadn't been taken up by Scholastic and the librarians, it may not have been such an ever-present sensation. It would have been like, I think, a hit, but I think it might have died down. But since they can market it as an early reader, like they can sell that thing forever to kids.
Yeah. And just think, because of that, Mariko Tamaki gets to make 4 coming-of-age, half-Asian, lesbian coming-of-age stories in high school where the lesbian runs away to Paris to explore her lesbianness.
I've read like 3 of those. I keep somehow expecting her to do something different. She never does.
And so here's the real question about that is I can't remember what I was going to say. I was going to be something. It was something to be snarky and really rude about lesbians.
Oh, so let's just let's make fun of. We can just make fun of Alison Bechdel.
Yeah. I mean, is that the gal who did that genderqueer book?
She's done so. Okay, so the she's known for Fun Home. That's her big hit. She's also known for, I think. Well, she's also known for the Bechdel test. So if you've ever heard of the Bechdel test, that was kind of her.
Which is an extremely specious sociological argument.
Very much so. And I think she's, even said that it's not. I think it's not is meant to be taken as seriously as some people take it, but I don't think she's against what the thrust of that. But she is a very,
no pun intended.
Yeah, I know. I know. I teed that one up. Okay, but Bechdel is she's a lesbian graphic novelist, and so she's done some work with memoir, and so it's very navel gazing. Hold on, I can. If you give me a second, I can pull up an example of her work.
And remember, we're talking about Kyrie tonight.
No, please. This is people don't want to. They don't want to do let's scroll through the campaign. They just
well, we have 3 of the creators here getting to show their personality. because
Yeah.
that's part of how you sell your online comic books to people on social media. Is you show that these people have personalities. Not
That's
so. I did this comic book because I really like comic books and anime.
Oh my gosh.
That's exactly what you're supposed to do. What are you talking about?
What?
well, that's
Oh.
the big problem you got to remember with that is that you've got me on the show, and my personality is pretty divisive. But it's my show, so I let it slide.
So if you've ever seen this is Alison Bechtel, and
I mean, that's terrible. I mean, I visually hate it. I'm not looking at the words, just visually. I hate that.
she's definitely more in what I would call the COMIX, the comics. She leans more towards that side of things. So if you don't like that type of
Here's
comic book work, you're not going to.
COMIX.
Yeah, comics, the
Comics.
underground stuff.
Yeah, your Valentino, your Crumb, yeah, Picard.
Okay.
So here's
Proud.
well, yeah, and here's the problem with the layout on this page. It took me too long to figure out what was going on because I kept looking at the background. That fancy rug.
Well, this is just a
too much-
panel.
Right up.
Okay, gotcha.
But
Yeah.
the rug immediately draws your attention away from the characters.
Yeah, the rug's got to go.
Or what you could do is you could color the rug like with a brighter, vibrant color, and that way it can have the detail but not distract from the characters. It would actually highlight the characters.
So what the thing is like, the rug that ties the room together. That's the opposite of this rug.
So what ties the story together is how Alison Bechtel and her father learned that they're gay, and that's the whole memoir of it. But that's standard for most memoirs. It's basically how I grew up and discovered what sex was. That's basically a memoir in a nutshell.
Well,
Yeah.
and the thing about that
That's
is
the point of them.
Yeah, I know. Which is it always strikes me as odd because people go, "Oh, superhero comics are so repetitive. It's always the same story." And I go, "Really? Have you ever picked up a memoir? It's like the exact
First of
same
all-
story every time."
First of all,
Mom, Dad, your faith is so outdated, and oh my gosh, I've discovered drugs and sex.
First of all, everything is the same story. So people that complain about that, I just don't read stories. Everything is the same story. So stop it. Second of all, that's not a bad thing.
Well, you can change the window dressing occasionally.
Oh yeah,
Because
and you should. It's just like the one of the things that I love about music history in the 20th century, right? Is every new trend, what they really do are rediscovering the best of the last trend, right? So like Buddy Holly, phenomenal stuff, right? And then he died, and people sort of didn't quite pick up where he left off. Other people were doing similar things that spun off from it, and then the Beatles break onto the scene, and they're doing Buddy Holly, right? And then they kind of evolve and change and get kind of weird, and then Elvis Costello comes in the 70s, and he's doing Buddy Holly, right?
But isn't he also doing Roy Orbison at the same time?
Well, Roy Orbison was doing Buddy Holly.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's what the 80s was like? Everyone grew up in the 60s, and they want to figure out how to recapture that optimism.
And like, you look at like even the Ramones, like, and the foundations of punk rock were rooted in that rockabilly, stuff that Buddy Holly was on the forefront of. Yeah. So it was all that kind of stuff together. And then you have like the new rock of the 2000s with like White Stripes and I'm trying to remember the other guys right now. But there's just a bunch of those bands that were really trained at the same time. They were still going back to that same rockabilly, blues roots music that they were all pulling from, because those are the things that touch our souls. There's a reason and that's just it's got carrying power.
Okay, so as the resident millennial, I'm going to have to interrupt you and say that we've hit dangerous, toxic levels of boomerism, and we're going to have to reel it back in a little bit. You're only allowed about 30 seconds to say how good the music was back in the day.
Well, yeah, he wasn't even talking about how good the music was. He's talking about the richness of the music, like how Ozzy Osbourne was basically a blues singer.
Yes, that's true.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I listen to video game soundtracks, so let's get.
Yeah. I mean, we can all agree.
Talk about vaporwave if you want to talk about that kind of music.
Ooh, I could do that.
Yeah, that's had an interesting history the past few years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we can all agree that playing and like a bunch of people playing up on a stage is dead now. Like that's just gone. It'll die with the boomers. For better or worse.
I actually don't think that that's true.
Yeah.
I don't think that's true either.
I think
Wow.
I think there's gonna be a huge resurgence in that
Well,
once
video
people,
game sountracks are
K-pop's
Those-
going to keep K-pop will keep it alive. Just
Well,
you know,
first
okay.
because
Uh-huh.
here's part of the thing though is like even electronica like can still be played live and people do
Yeah.
that. I mean, like I
Yeah,
was just
concerts can still happen, sure.
Yeah.
But it's going to be like that girl who like plays electric violin and dances ballet at the same time. It's going to be like that kind of thing.
yeah,
And she's
well,
playing like Nintendo songs.
Mhm.
Like that's,
yeah, I think there'll be some of that, but I mean it's everything comes back around,
yeah.
So and that's
I hope they still learn how to play guitar. I don't know. We'll see. Sorry, I'm looking at Barnes and Noble. I just remember a few months ago I went into Barnes and Noble and I saw an anthology. It was one of those like the best comics. I guess it was K or COMIX of 20. I guess it was 19.
Yeah.
And it's in the same section with Marvel and DC everything, and it's only comics with an X content.
Yeah, in a small and getting smaller section. Meanwhile, the manga's expanding into a second section now.
Yeah, well, and I
Yeah.
I think like, and I like a lot of the underground stuff. I think
Yeah, sure.
there's a certain ballsiness to it.
I got an affinity for it, but it's
One of the things that I
not
think
growing.
that I think one of the well, it's because they chased out their audience. You'll even talk to
actually, I think there's two reasons for it. Go ahead, Reese. I'll ruin
This
it
is
after
so
you're
fascinating.
but I was watching an interview with Spiegelman and talking about, because he came up out of the comics movement before Mouse, and he said that one of the things that he kind of realized was that it was a Spiegelman was talking, and there was another interview with Kitchen, who started Kitchen Comics, and what they both realized was that they had gone so heavy into the offensive to be offensive stuff that there wasn't any staying power. Once their audience had kids, nobody was reading their stuff anymore.
They're definitely they're definitely the punk of comics, and they had the same problems that I think punk had.
Well, the problem is that punk stopped understanding what the point of being offensive to be offensive was.
Yes, I would agree with that entirely.
Right,
and
and
that's why Crumb et al. Lost their cultural relevancy. Is they forgot what they were doing and why they were doing it, and so that's why we end up with comics with an X being like Green Day.
Well, I would also add to that, and this is something that I think is very indicative of our current times, is that if you think about history in a very cyclical way, things kind of come in waves and come around. What comes around goes around, comes around, whatever. And so what I think we're seeing, and what people have been so, at least traditional superhero people have been so against, is the fact that the COMIX influences have infiltrated them. They've come into the mainstream.
Oh yeah.
Like the big thing that made comics with an X initially, or one of the things I noticed, is the fact that it was I would almost say a necessary counterpoint to the superhero medium, right? The genre. So like superheroes are all about, taking reality and taking it to a hyperbole. Here's the human form, and we're going to take it to an extreme sense of what we think the ideal is. And comics with an X went in the other direction. No, we're going to take things and make it ugly on purpose. But now in the superhero, which was supposed to be the hyperbole of, this sort of platonic ideal of what humanity was, is now trying to be ugly on purpose. And so like,
hold on.
Go ahead.
Isn't that the platonic ideal for the artists who are creating that? Don't they believe that is the platonic truth of humanity?
Well, I think. Well,
sorry.
yeah, probably.
Say, can you repeat? Say that so my brain can understand it.
So
basically, that these people are making it ugly on purpose because they believe humanity is ugly.
Oh yeah. Well, internally,
right.
But the superhero ideal was to take at least the physical side of it and show how amazing it was. And you have this sort of like, mundane realism, even, devotion to ugly. that you see in comics with an X. But now in the superhero realm, because the superhero realm wants to deconstruct itself, is now embracing ugliness in both, and there's no reason to have an ugly comic anymore, because you could just pick up an issue of like She-Hulk.
Well, and one of the things I think to look at too with all of that is that the idea of if I understand this right, and I'm not as well read as I should be, the platonic is not necessarily the platonic idea is not necessarily the way things are presently, but the ideal of how they ought to be, right? So
the standard and source of,
right, so that like the idea of like an apple, like the ideal apple is the
perfect proportions.
Well, and it's not just the perfect proportions, but it's also the intrinsic appleness of an apple, and all apples share in that appleness. And the ideal that anything, like if you took like whatever could be an apple, that's the idea of the apple.
I think it's safe to say that comics with an X don't really ascribe to philosophical Platonism.
Well, no. That's what I'm saying is, but like the idea of looking at the idea of like their ideal, like the like Mariko Tamaki's concept of ideal, right? Or more accurately, her sister, because I've read more of her work.
Part of the problem is that
Jillian,
going to the philosophy of it is that comics with an X and people who embrace a lot of that countercultural stuff, they don't believe in an ideal. In fact, believing in an ideal is a problem, because if you believe in an ideal, then you could oppress other people. It could lead to oppression of other people as you pursue that ideal, when you should in fact just embrace everything just being ugly and real.
But here's the problem, though, is that is an oppression.
Okay, I'm not saying I agree with that. I'm just saying that, like, yeah.
Reese, there's a classic statement for that. If these people didn't have double standards, they wouldn't have standards at all.
That's true for a lot of us.
I was also going to say that, the amount of times that people on the other side of the spectrum point out the hypocrisy of the extreme radical left, it's like, are you trying to get like a $5 footlong at Subway for it? Like, I see people on Twitter and it's like, oh, I found another hypocrisy example. And I'm like, yoo-hoo, fill out your bingo card. But you don't get anything out of it because they don't care.
It's a divine feature. I mean, it's a design feature. It's not a flaw. Like, that's the whole point.
Right, exactly.
They see asymmetry and they're going to fix it with more asymmetry.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
but like, that's one of the things I love about Tolkien's mythology is how he does the war on heaven concept. Where God creates a divine song, but there's an imperfection in the song that he understands exists to highlight the beauty of the rest of the song. But that imperfection in turn leads to the fall, demonic things, this, that, and the other thing, which is the form, the particulars of the form of that imperfection in the divine song.
I like that. That sounds pretty platonic, I guess.
I was gonna say I like Tolkien. You're not. I will just say yes to anything you say about Tolkien, except for the fact that man had an unhealthy attraction to trees.
Hey, he grew up in rural England, and then he saw all of his trees get destroyed, and it affected him as a little boy.
Growing up in Nebraska, I have to disagree with you, Twitless. There's something magical about trees.
No, there are, but Tolkien almost took it to a romantic level. There's an interview that and they had him walking around Oxford, and I don't know if it's a BBC interview, and I read something else that said that he felt really gypped by the end of Macbeth because the trees actually don't get up and walk, and so that's partly why he did the Ents and the Hurons the way he did them, because it was like he was addressing a wrong that he felt from a literary perspective. But setting that aside, he's walking around Oxford, and he's just like magnetized to trees. He's just like, look at this tree. I just love this tree, and it's just like, dude, but I love Tolkien. He's amazing, but that man really loved trees.
So getting back to how Mouse ruined comics.
Okay. not just Mouse.
Yeah, Mouse started the trend, I guess. Well, I don't know, maybe did comics become cool and
I like Mouse.
No, Mouse is fine.
But Mouse
like,
Volume 1 is fine. Mouse Volume 2 is
yeah.
navel gazing bullshit.
Okay, you need to, if you want navel gazing. See, that's the thing is like I guess I've read so much navel gazing that it's like all relative to me, and so I go, oh, Spiegelman's navel gazing isn't bad because if you read Alison Bechdell's navel gazing, you will just it's like a Mies and a Beam. It's like this infinite hallway of just like she stares into herself and goes, wow, I'm special.
Well, okay, and I do have to start to interrupt Matt, but I have to entirely agree with you on that because while that was insufferable in Mouse, it's also entirely true that Spiegelman grew up in a really hard environment under the weight of his mother's suicide, under the weight of his father's maladaptiveness. So, like, it makes sense that he'd be screwed up, and he screwed up in the ways that you would expect him to be screwed up, and it wasn't overly debilitating. It was just unpleasant because of his whatever.
No, it's more the meta. It's the phenomenon of, I guess, these librarians, I guess, making it part of like an upper class status symbol, I guess, to welcome comics in, and then that made it instantly. Then I guess as a natural result, you get the split in the late '80s into the '90s of low class comics versus high class comics. And people aren't. They're reading just one or the other at that point.
Yeah. Okay.
And then it continues to get worse until both of them, dry up on the vine. So
I'm gonna come back to that because I really think that there's something to be said about that, and that is like that the conflict. And maybe this is a good discussion point, but the conflict between high and low art, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's three.
Tony, there's totally.
There's three tiers of art. There's high art, there's pop art, and then there's low art.
Right.
Oh man, if my timing had been better, I would have said that. And then there's Forces of Good and Evil.
Yeah, that is way down there. I will agree. So, but the thing is like I question those distinctions, right? I do think, but I think some of it has to do with I don't think because I don't necessarily think it's the level of skill that goes into it. I think it's the nature of the questions that go into it, right?
No, it's just like different classes in our culture, like certain kinds of comics now.
It's about, to quote a famous movie reviewer, it's about consuming product and getting excited to consume next product.
Ouch. Ouch.
Right.
But it has to be Holocaust Mouse comics.
but here's part of the situation with this, right? Is that when it comes to all arts, when it comes to music, when it comes to movies, when it comes to whatever, the difference is not like when it comes to like high art, because I'm not even talking like class art, because I think that actually distracts the subject. Because one of the things we have with the comics that are acceptable amongst the hoity-toity, all right, that what you actually have is their low art, right? They because if you're really going to look at what defines high art versus low art, right? High art is looking toward these universal truths, is looking toward these aspirational goals, looking toward these ideals, right? And low art is introspective. What is my feeling and my reaction, right? What is just my life, and all you're doing is reflecting your life and your experience. You're not looking at the bigger picture of the world, and that would be how I would look at what really defines high art versus low art, right?
Really?
Yeah.
Even today in 2021, high art is extrospective, I guess, and low art is introspective.
I don't think those things change, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing is, it's like somebody said the other day, was talking about, do you really have this opinion in 2021? And I said, if your political opinions change based on what year it is, you don't have political opinions. You have bedtime stories.
Well, I mean, I'm just talking. I mean, culture changes. Culture's tastes change.
I don't think culture
and
changes.
Our classes change.
Well, let's
use
William Shakespeare as an example. William Shakespeare started out as gutter art.
Yep.
Then became pop culture art. Then became high art.
Right, but it
Yeah.
was the thing is what it was always there. Like the thing of the beauty in Shakespeare is that it's multi-tiered. It has your dick and fart jokes, but it also asks what is the purpose of man, right? So it's all in there. It's
Right. There's yeah, I would say with Shakespeare you had a blend of the two, and so it kind of depends, because like with Shakespeare you have some of the you have the appeal to the masses kind of stuff, but then there's also some stuff for the people who want to ponder some deep mysteries and
because
broad themes and stuff.
Because here's part of the thing.
And that's what makes Shakespeare so awesome, is because he was able to appeal to both audiences, the people who were there for deep philosophical reasons and the people who were there to just be entertained. And when you get into
and film used to do that too. We don't really have that, because I think part of the situation is that the hoi polloi are every bit as capable as of appreciating the higher concepts. They just don't know it. Right?
You see, that's why a lot of sociological perspectives in art are all about who consumes the art and what portion of the population it reaches. That's why I use the high, pop, and low art.
Right, and that's what makes comics unique, because they came from a tradition of sensation literature, which has a lot of roots in the Victorian period, and that's all popular art. That's Charles Dickens, who is considered classic today, was a popular artist. He wrote to the masses, and
he
then
hated it, but it was true.
Right, and but even more so, you have people like Wilkie Collins, who wrote what's called sensation fiction, which is fiction that went even further than Dickens and focused particularly on action and suspense and high like melodrama. And the public ate that up. And then when you get into the visual form, which suits sensation so well, because if you have a plot and it's very much about action and suspense and drama, those things are exactly what comics do the best. And so comics very much came from that tradition of sensationalism, which is one of the big one of the main reasons why the librarians all hated them. And so it just they lended themselves to stories that had a lot of action, which therefore made them much more violent, by just what they tended to do the best. And then the librarians were like, no, we want to tell stories about how to raise good kids. And there was
and they
quite a
got
lot of
more
friction.
interest. They started rewarding introspective comics, I think, like autobiographical stuff, right?
Yeah,
And that also tended to correlate with young men not wanting to read. It's so weird.
Well, and then and that's part of my whole take on the subject, right? The idea that they're not really, there's not a necessary divorce between high and low art, but also this idea that boys can learn, and I think Lord of the Rings is a great example of this, right? Boys can learn those high truths, those ideas, those ideals, while they're reading about killing orcs.
It's just what's popular. What are you going to read about in the New York Times versus what are you going to read about on?
But that's part of my thing. Like going back to the whole punk rock idea, right? Like punk rock came out at about a time and reminded people of this raw rockabilly sound, right? When everybody had forgotten about it because everything was stadium rock and prog rock. And not that there's necessarily anything wrong with that, but they filled a gap when for Buddy Holly when everyone was listening to David Bowie, right? So or Captain and Tennille.
All right, 30 seconds. Your 30 seconds are up. No more boomer music.
So by the way, Matt, do you feel good that you've picked such smart people to help you write stories?
Yes. Well, you always have to hire people who are better than you, right? So I've tried to do that. Twitless, you remain unproven, but
yeah, I'm unhireable.
No, just unproven.
I was just gonna say, it's like,
I'll see.
Matt comes in and says, "I hire people who are better than me." So Twitless, how's it going?
That would have been the better joke. Yeah.
That'd have been amazing.
We'll get you. We'll get you reading on some books. We'll see Spot Run. We'll get that done.
Here we go.
Joke's on you. I don't read. That's why I read comics. What do you?
This is perfect. Dave Ashanovich, the Sting the musician, Sting the wrestler, Sting the sword.
What's really great is we could do a whole show talking about how Ric Flair helped groom and shape the career of Sting, the wrestler. And
cool.
then it just went totally into the garbage at the end of his career because he got badly injured. And now he just beats people up with a baseball bat. That's what wrestling is now for him.
Yeah, I don't know anything after the like the beginning of WWE, I guess. So I'm pretty ignorant, but I like it from afar. I do. I tried WrestleMania this year, but
I've learned a lot about storytelling by just learning some of the fundamentals of how wrestling tells stories. Wrestling is very good at storytelling, and a person who had a little oopsie doopsie with allegedly raping dozens of people did do an interesting video that talked about the trajectory of the career of Triple H as a singular character that has been involved in the popular culture for 30 plus years now. And how you can see a single coherent character narrative from start to finish. Even though the continuity changes multiple times in the middle of the story.
Yeah. Well, I guess it's like Days of Our Lives, but for dudes, I suppose, where like
I've
the
heard
characters, they go forever, and the character arcs never quite, I mean, until they actually retire, but then there's always the comeback, but it's just like the joy of seeing talented people continue to, I guess, entertain and surprise you it's like I guess the journey is the point of it all. Like unlike stories in the typical sense where you're thinking about the destination, I guess, like the climax, like you just get excited about how it just never ends, I suppose. Kind of like a sports team, I suppose, too.
I was gonna say it's also just like superhero comics as well, never ending story. Yeah.
But the big thing is, like, for what I've learned a lot about wrestling is you do a build up of the story, you hit your high point, and then you have something called a blow off, which allows you to go back to a new normal, reset the clock so that you can then build up to the next thing. And where comics in the mainstream have gone wrong is they don't have a build up, there's no blow off, there's just things just happen because it's in the book.
Well, there is build up, I think, in places, because like all the events they do, that's nothing but build up.
Right, but it's not build up to anything. So it's like turning up the volume on your speaker.
How do you figure? Because like when you're like, because I remember when the Avengers were doing the Out of Time, they built up through several even other crossovers to the fact that time will be broken, and that led to secret. No,
but time wasn't broken and it didn't go anywhere.
I mean, it did, because that led to was it Secret War or whatever?
Well, the Hickman version of Secret Wars. Which,
that one,
was basically like 3 months off, and then look, everything's basically the same as it was before.
Well, I mean,
so it didn't really go anywhere.
That kind of talks about your Twitless. You just did that time travel story where you brought back the dinosaurs, and they're now ruling Earth. So.
Cool. Oh yeah. When I break a timeline, it stays broken.
My favorite broken timeline comic book is Cadillacs and Dinosaurs.
Cadillacs and Dinosaurs was pretty cool. I only read a couple of issues, but I used to watch the cartoon.
I never got super duper deep into the lore of the comic, but I imagine it was kind of like just, a place where things fell through the cracks of time and made it their own little civilization.
It sounds like a Psychobilly comic.
It was a very Psychobilly comic.
Cool.
Which I am actually working on a Psychobilly comic myself.
Oh, neat.
I know.
I don't know if I'll ever get finished because I've got the perfect artist for it, and he really wants to do it, but I don't have the money to pay him.
What? You're saying it's expensive when you're not an artist to make a comic?
Oh man, especially because this guy's got his own projects, so he's like.
Yeah,
it's Carl Tunes. If you see him, he's working on his own stuff, and so he won't work on mine without money.
Yeah,
which is fine.
The nerve!
I want to pay him, but it's gonna take I got other stuff that I gotta a little bit of time is what it's gonna have to be.
I
mean,
have some stuff to tease a project, but at the end of the day, I'm going to need to ask for like somewhere between 15 and 20 grand to really get it launched, and I need to build up a platform to do that right.
Yeah.
And my artist sometimes does artwork for Penthouse, and I can't like fault him for like saying, "Hey, listen, man, I got a job to do for Penthouse."
Yeah.
Yeah. It's hard to get started. I guess you kind of. I mean, I like Twitless's approach of just preloading your first comic as much as possible, maybe even to 100%, and then hoping to raise funds off of that so you can be in the black to fund your next one. There's
That's
always
another
that
reason
idea.
why I'm working with you, so I can learn stuff from the back end to make it easier on the front end when I get ready for it.
I hope. I don't know if I've taught. I haven't taught you anything, but I hope you've learned some things just from
I've
watching.
learned
I
lots
guess.
of things.
Oh, good.
We're about to find out if they're useful things. But...
I learned so much.
So for our host with the most here, how exactly did you get involved with Wild Tales of Carrier? Because I mean, we've been doing some jazz for about an hour. We might as well get to like the main beat, even if we go back to jazz.
Yeah. So here's the ticket. I have been slowly building a universe for almost 20 years. And about a year ago, I was working on a script that I've got. Actually, I finished. I've got the pencil art. I'm still waiting on the ink art for it. It's a different project than the one I was talking about.
Is that universe the one that's the Zing comics?
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
I mean, everything I've written for myself is all part of one thing. So,
Gotcha.
So Force of Good and Evil happens. The Zing Comics anthology happens in that one. The expositioner stories that are.
I just finished reading. I think it was Mastermind, and I actually legitimately thought that was brilliant.
Oh yeah. Thank you.
So that was very well done. Because
Cool.
what was amazing about it was
I forgot I sent you that.
Yeah, I'm going to pull up an image of it on stream here in a second so we can.
That was our first anthology. We did it in 2006, and that's actually one of my stories. So,
but the art was a perfect counterbalance to what the punchline of that was. It was very well done.
Yeah, I was pretty happy with that. So,
all right, hold on.
But anyway,
nice endorsement.
So anyway, back to while he's looking at that or whatever. Back to the story. So I reached out to Matt about help me with some research for a story, and we were talking about the whole dealio, and
about a year ago, I think.
Yeah, about a year ago, and he pitched me some ideas, and I said, this would fit into the stuff you're doing. He's like, yeah, it would fit really well, and I was like, maybe we should combine our universes, and he said no. You see, I was like,
well, I think I said yeah.
It's a mess.
Fine,
like that,
but I couldn't draw it.
Matt says no, but I'd like
I'd
like you to write a story for me. I said, oh, really? He said yes. So I said okay. So I half wrote a story for him.
Yeah, and my perspective is that I knew the only way I could hope to try and tame Matt Reese is to hire him for something. So he'd be nicer to me on Twitter, and that failed. But I got a good story. So,
and my story is I've not gotten as far. I was frustrated with wanting to write the great American novel because, I mean, who doesn't want to write the great American novel? And then I've talked to myself into, write a comic book script. And then just one day I did it for a version of the comic book I hope to produce, which I have my visual avatar art for here. And I didn't hate it. For the first time, I wrote a first draft. I didn't hate it. I revised it again, got some art, and, started moving myself along the process. And then I saw Matt saying, hey, I really want to combine Sherlock Holmes and The Man Who Would Be King. And I didn't really have a good idea to do it, or something like that. You were struggling with how to execute the idea in your head. And I said, just pitched him an idea.
Because I just knew that they both had the Second Anglo-Afghan War in common. So But beyond
And-
that,
Yeah. And immediately popped into my head, boom, an idea, and we went back and forth and we executed. Have an excellent art done on there that really goes well with the type of story we're telling. And
Jesse White.
Jesse White is amazing for that type of art, which is perfect for that type of story. And the rest is history. And Matt and I have, pitched a whole bunch of different things to Matt, and hopefully a lot of us can get Matt to the point where he could just say, you know what, I'm going to be making comic books full time now. That's going to be my career.
No. Oh, please no. No. My idea of success is intentionally staying like side hobby with this. I don't know. I don't get the whole maybe this is me turning into comics with an X, but I love the idea of I had a teacher in undergrad, and she said she knew as soon as she started taking art seriously that she wanted to become a teacher so that she'd never have to worry about getting paid for her art. And I thought that was the stupidest idea I've ever heard of. That she would just want to express stuff and not have to worry about who's going to buy it. And she's a fine artist. Obviously a fine artist is going to say that, but like a side hobby comics person can say that too. Like we can take more risks. I think we don't have to. I don't like lowest common denominator, but like we don't have to like shoot with a shotgun, I guess, in terms of what sort of stories we're trying to tell. We can go narrower and try and get a more niche audience, because we're all in niche audiences at the end of the day, right? Like we don't, like we all have kind of weird minority interests, and I don't think you can really try to pull that off if you're trying to pay.
Do you really think
your
this
bills.
isn't for everybody, Matt? Come on, look at that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I just wanted to ask, so when you say that she was a fine artist, are you saying she's a fine artist, she's a fine artist, or she's a fine artist? Because there's three different doors there.
There's actually four. Because
That's funny.
She's fine.
I think her I remember her name was like some sort of pun on her being attractive, and we used to make that joke actually, and I don't even remember what the pun was. Let's just say her name was Professor Fine. It was something like that. So
Okay.
yeah, but it's I don't know, do you guys want to do this for a living?
Yes.
Okay,
So here's
Cool.
here's my idea. Here's my idea. I make some comic books. I write some comic books for other people,
Mhm.
and I send them off to some people saying, "Hey, I want to write for your TV show. Here's some sample comic books I do."
You're using it as a leg up.
Oh
to get
no.
No, not as a
real
leg up.
business.
Not as a leg up. As a portfolio piece.
No, it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Now let's just say, crazy thing. I'm able to sell, six figures, do like 4 6-figure campaigns a year. If I could pull something off like that, then oh yeah, I would totally do this as a living.
Well,
Just
yeah.
like if I could work from home, I would work as an assistant editor at Marvel or DC, although honestly they wouldn't work with me. But I mean, I would totally do that because I'm basically making what an assistant editor at Marvel makes now. And I think I would end up working out better. In fact, I would do it, and I would fly to New York like once a quarter if that's what I needed to do for meetings. Although we don't have to do that anymore. We got Zoom meetings and stuff.
I feel like people have the better odds at winning the lottery than making a living in comics.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
for sure.
that's been the history of comics: is
Yeah.
you die broke and poor in the gutter.
Yep. That's 100% true. But no, I mean, for me, it's not so much. I mean, I would love to be able to do this for a living, or at least part time. But a lot of it for me has more to do with the fact that that's the resource. That would be the resources that it would take to tell my Mitchnerian story, right? That because I mean, Mitchner is probably not a really good example, but at the risk of seeming, well, I've already compared myself to Mitchner. I have this epic in my head, and I don't mean epic in like it's just the most amazing story ever. I mean, it's literally a giant story made up of 100 little stories, right? So it's like an epic, like a classic mythical epic. So with the cast of hundreds and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, several of you guys on the panel here, you guys have seen behind my curtain.
Mhm.
So it's ridiculous. And if the only way it's ever going to get told is if I can make enough money on it, or that's like, I have the time, or I'll die first and then that'll be fine, I guess. But
Then you just become a part of the universe.
something. I don't know, man. But yeah, so it's like, I have a career that I really like, and I think it's important, but at the same time, it's still only a limited amount of time on that. But yeah, so that's how I got Matt came at me with the story, and
So I was pondering my own mortality, and then it was like, let's make a comic.
yeah, well,
I didn't know I caught you in that moment.
those are unrelated. But yeah, it was I'm just changing the subject back again.
Memento Mori.
Yeah. Well, no, that's the story of my life. Like, I don't know. I don't think I've ever talked to you about this, Twitless, but it was on one of the first Faith and Comics streams that I did about a year and a half ago. We were talking about our conversion stories. And what brought me around to the faith was being 5 and knowing that I would die. I mean, like the absolute certainty of my death was something that I came to very, very early in life.
So my journey was weird like that, but in a different way. I died when I was 18 months old, 9 times on the operating table.
Wow.
Wow.
Had a freak lawnmower accident where the lawnmower randomly started up from the off and brake position, ran over me. If there wasn't a mysterious indentation in the ground that nobody remembers there, I would have been blended up. Said I wouldn't walk again. I was playing with the other kids in the child ward, by the end of the week. And I only have a really gruesome looking scar on one hip and a mild scar on an elbow as a legacy of that accident. And that was where it started the spiritual journey that I'm still going on. At one point when I was 13 or 14, my mother first made the first major introduction of mythology into my reading by telling me I wasn't allowed to read it, so I did. Said it's like comic books for grown-ups. And that became a thing. And then I reached a certain point in my life where I decided to become Jewish because I wanted a faith community where I could fit most of my religious experience into, but that actually had a statistically significant number of people in it. And
that was your reason. That's interesting.
Yeah. Like I could come up with all sorts of things, although now there are people who are starting up online religions where you don't need people, but that's the opposite of what I was looking for. I was looking at finding connections with people.
Yeah.
But then, going back to Memento Mori, as a famous French philosopher once said, hell is other people.
I definitely think there's some truth in that.
A little side diversion. Have you seen the Rabbi from Another Planet yet, Larry? Have you checked him out?
I have not yet, no.
He's pretty funny.
I imagine he is. Most people who are rabbis of some sort or another tend to be.
Yeah, he's like a British dude who, he's trying. He's doing the same videos everyone else is doing, but he's sprinkling in like Kabbalistic end time prophecies in between, like his Captain America Winter Soldier reviews. And it's kind of interesting. I'm like taking notes on the Zohar.
That's a YouTube niche that everybody's saying like Kathleen Kennedy's at it again. Meanwhile, here are the signs that the world is going to come to its imminent demise soon.
Oh yeah, I mean he's laying down dates.
Let's discuss the demiurge.
Yeah. Like, so here's the feast of Shavuot, and this is why Captain America, the Winter Soldier TV show, is worse than Hitler. Like, he's doing stuff like that.
So, on a related funny story to that,
it can't possibly be worse than Hitler.
On a related funny story to that, my major in college was international studies, and I decided to make that my major because I had 4 wisdom teeth coming in. I was taking an Introduction to International Religions course. I was hopped up on Vicodin, and I got the highest grade in the class for the midterm.
Hmm.
And before I decided to convert to Judaism, my mother thought about converting. And I went there to make sure the rabbi was on the level, was the right kind of guy for her. And I showed up to one of her conversion classes, and he made a joke, oh, he could substitute the class for me when I'm not here. And they were talking about Tu Shvot, which is the New Year for trees. So I was able to go into all the Kabbalistic details of the multiple souls and the trees and, different evolutionary levels of life and how that
Wait,
led to
trees get their own New Year?
Yes,
Wow.
trees get their own New Year.
Yeah.
And that deals with the
Huh.
fact that there's the a vegetative, an animal, a human, and then a covenant soul, if you're going with the traditional Jewish idea of the soul. And when you get into traditional Jewish ideas on reincarnation, which ended up going away when Jews started living around a bunch of people who believed in it, and one of the fundamental religious principles of Judaism, much like punk rock music, is, hey, we're not going to conform to all these normies around us, screw you, was that, the vegetative soul would eventually become the animal soul, which would eventually become the human soul, which would then rise into the covenant soul, and then the cycle of rebirth would be born again.
Yeah. Yeah, we really got to hook you up with the rabbi from another planet.
So
Yeah.
comic books.
Yeah.
Comic books. So, Matt, did you realize that this would be one of your better shows when you assembled this team together?
Oh, I
Oh,
wouldn't.
I knew. I was so glad he asked us to do this because I knew it'd be fun. It's always higher quality. Like, it's a higher quality chat. It's a higher quality panel.
I have to be. Which Matt were you talking to? First of all,
I was talking to you because
Okay.
this show does have your names on the door.
yeah, that's true. So
Yeah.
here's the. This is going to sound like a dick, right? This is a great show, but it's not necessarily one of my best.
Ah,
I've just had so many really good shows.
okay, I can accept that.
You
I
see,
can go along
so
with
We
that.
got
It's
45 more minutes. We can.
Yeah,
we
yeah.
can pull
Well, I
this
mean,
off.
it's like I just, I think this is a really fun show. But I mean, I've had some really, really, really good shows. So I've had some what do you
It's all
call
good.
it?
The common denominator is always me. I mean,
Yeah.
it's all good.
So I probably had a couple of stinkers too. But I've had just there've been so many really, really, really good shows. So it's been it's like I can't say this is like this is in the top half, but I'm not going to sit there and say it's in the top 10.
Can,
Hey,
can I ask
work
you
with
what
the top
your
third?
yeah?
Probably top third. Probably top
We'll
third.
get we'll get it there. We'll get it
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Matt, like, what do you think? So 2021 indie crowdfunded comics YouTube looks different from 2020. Crowdfunded comics YouTube, looks different from 2019, 2018. Do you like what you see in 2021?
Oh, I don't. Okay. So here's the question. Here's the situation.
Yeah. Like,
I've
what's the
kind of-
standard by which you judge? Maybe that's the question. Like, how would you judge this year compared to previous years? And are you seeing improvements or
So
room for growth?
Here's the situation. Here's the situation. I'm the absolute 100% wrong person to ask that question.
No, that's why I wanted to ask you.
Because I don't really pay attention to anyone else's content. That's in the comic sphere anymore, right?
Yeah.
Except I watch the only show the only person's content that I watch routinely is Perch.
Perch has high value content always.
High value content, and it's and Chuck Dixon. Yeah. I get Chuck Dixon's Q&A show pretty often.
Oh,
but,
does he? I didn't even know he did one.
Oh yeah, it's weekly.
See, yeah, there's just so many.
Is that the one that's on? Is that the one that's on unauthorized?
He does an unauthorized show, but he has a YouTube show too.
Okay.
Oh,
His
wow.
Ask Chuck Dixon's his YouTube show. And I think his unauthorized shows goes into more of the writing process and all that kind of stuff. But the Ask Chuck Dixon's just an AMA kind of a thing. It's not a stream. He collects questions throughout the week and then picks the best of them and answers them and gets into. The thing I love about it is, first of all, I cut my teeth on Chuck Dixon, right?
Yeah.
and in my comic teeth anyway. And the other side of it is is that he gets into like a ton of history because he grew up as a fan, so he'll get deep cuts into pulp origins of comics and talking about, just like this last week he was talking about, somebody wrote about the Marvel's magazines that they had in the 70s through the 90s, and they were a magazine format, black and white,
Yeah.
like grindhouse kind of thing.
They had like some of the early Conan stuff was in those.
Yeah, exactly. They actually had a Conan magazine, but the thing I hadn't realized, and I felt embarrassed that I didn't know this. The reason that Marvel was got into the magazines, was because they had always been in magazines, but they weren't always comic magazines. They did like men's magazines and softcore stuff.
Really?
Back in the 50s. Yeah, like Swank was one. Was produced by Marvel Magazine Company, and
Really?
and some of that other stuff. So when that, when Playboy and Penthouse cornered the market for the highbrow men's magazines in the 70s, Marvel moved over to like taking some of their comic content and doing a black and white book. That was, and they so they got into the Frank Frazetta covers and all that kind of stuff, doing the Conan, doing there was a Punisher book for a while that was all geared at an older audience, and then the regular comics. And the reason for then they were higher price point. But part of the reason for that was that they needed something on the shelf on the newsstands that was paying the cost of them being on the newsstands. And they were moving enough comics to want to be on the newsstands, but they weren't moving enough comics to pay for the newsstand. So they needed a higher ticket item that would pay for the spot on the newsstand so that they could make a profit selling comics.
That is an interesting bit of history.
Because in order to maintain their market for comics, they had to keep the price point down. And then they moved away from that as the direct market exploded in the 80s and 90s.
Huh.
So 2021 crowdfunded YouTube comics is
history, man. I don't know. That's the thing, is just like, that's part of the thing. You look at the intersection of Perch and Dixon for me, right? It's that serious look into history, the honest appraisal of personal taste, and the acknowledgement of what has been great and what hasn't been, so and just enough inside baseball to keep it interesting,
yeah.
So
what about you guys? Do you think, because you guys have seen some changes, so are we better off or are we worse off?
So I think comics crowdfunding YouTube as a genre is in trouble, but the personalities that drive it are fine. Like if you look at the evolution of Perch's channel, infamous Richard C. Meyer, your boy Zach, Just Some Guy, the strong personalities still lead, and a lot of other people follow. So what it really is, you need like interesting formats. Like Kami Mark was an interesting format show. It's a little bit too Morning Zoo Radio, I think, but there are people who love Morning Zoo Radio, so that works. That works real well.
Yeah, no, he's got a very loyal. It's small, but everything's small nowadays. That's what I'm noticing.
This is like the podcasty NPR sort of vibe, and like people like that.
Yeah, and the self-deprecating British kind of thing going on. It's cute.
But I was talking about like this kind of experience. Like, again, it's about personality. Yeah. It's about things that are real experiences that people listen to while they're working out at the gym.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to grind out like 15-minute hunks of stuff, we could talk about how this is terrible or that is terrible. Hey, I would love to come and talk about the entire run of the TV series Vagrant Queen and how it was both an amazing missed opportunity, and it was actually worse than the original comic books at the same time.
Yeah, I loved. Yeah, you really served that up, and we didn't get to hear enough about that.
So
Yeah.
like I
So
can't
Go ahead.
remember where it was, but I read the first issue of Vagrant Queen. I think it was a free comic book day book, maybe.
yeah,
And
they've
it
had
was-
it on Free Comic Book Day. They've had it on like Amazon as a freebie.
It was horrible.
It is horrible. So the
Yeah, it was-
concept,
The problem for me was it was just like, God, it's just Star Wars with less likable people.
well,
Wow.
no, you're being unfair to Star Wars. It's very generic space fantasy with a couple of interesting ideas, but it doesn't know how to use them. So the principal idea of Vagrant Queen is you're the chosen one, space princess of the space empire, but the French Revolution happens, and you're a kid when it happens, and you say, you know what, screw it, I'm going to become a space hobo. And that's considered a good and heroic choice, so that the character can focus on being a lesbian.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
Also, it turns out that Golly G. Willikers in the Reign of Terror, the authoritarian regime, turns into a dictatorship, and
Well,
the
obvious.
reluctant hero eventually has to do something about it.
Of course, the revolt turns into a dictatorship. It was always going to be that, man. Listen, the old boss is the same as the new boss. It's always that way.
Exactly, but the concept of the chosen one princess character who's like, nah, man, I'm out. That can be interesting,
Mhm.
but you need more to hang an actual story around. Also, one of her cohorts is a extremely effeminate beta male Canadian. And in the TV show, he keeps reminding you he's Canadian because he's super duper into Canadian football.
Hmm.
Talking
Wow.
about the Grey Cup.
That's amazing.
Yeah, you know, like, again,
Sign me up.
the problem is that when they made this in the show, nobody said, no, we need to lead harder into this. We need somebody with Alan Tudyk levels of acting to be super duper Canadian, like from Fargo, kind of super duper Canadian.
Well,
That's what we need.
Those are super duper North Dakotan.
Right, but you know, North Dakota and Canada, they're very close. Well,
Yeah,
when you
they
get-
are.
Yeah. And you know, then there's her polyamorous, polygendered, you know, ship repair person in the series. And it's like, okay, you know, so she's got a girlfriend who's on one of the main characters. That's fine, I guess. Maybe we could have, you know, did something interesting with her. No, okay, we're not gonna do that. And it turns out that the Canadian actually betrayed her to the evil regime because they tried to convince him that he could go back to Earth to see his family. But he never does because he gives that up to save his friend, but in the process allows the evil regime to go to Earth because, spoiler, it's a streaming series that did so poorly on its first episode. They're like saying, look, if you didn't trick the South African government into paying all your production costs, we would just cancel this right now. We literally need the streaming content, so we'll run the rest of the series. So their bait to get a second season was, oh, the evil space Nazis are gonna invade Earth. Because also, spoiler, it turns out that the space empress, who was the mother of our main character, was also a super space Nazi.
You're just making this. You're just making me all sorts of hungry for this narrative.
Exactly. Now, they took this totally serious. Yeah, exactly. And here's the thing. Number one, they didn't lean into this and just play this out as absurd it is. Like, my biggest complaint about the Fantastic Four movies is, no, I want an Eastern European dictator in a metal suit who sounds like he's talking out of Shakespeare. And he's also a wizard.
Oh, okay. So I have like an hour-long PowerPoint presentation I can give us. Not a PowerPoint, but like Doctor Doom is my favorite comic book character almost of all time. So I have very particular tastes for
Yes,
how
but you understand what I mean, though.
I do. I just
embrace all of it.
the only thing I would say, the only caveat I would add to what you're saying is that, and the reason I say this is because some of the worst writers of Doom have kind of done that, and they're like, "Oh, I'm just going to make him super cheesy and hyperbolic," and that's what Matt Fraction did. And I could have like burned the comic that he wrote because he reduced a real Shakespearean character, because Shakespearean characters can often have a lot of subtlety to them and really interesting motives to them and just be really well written. And and Matt Fraction had I think it was like one issue he wrote Dr. Doom, and he made him into this shallow piece of garbage, and I just hated it. And as much as Hickman has a lot of problems, how he wrote Doom was I really appreciated.
He was one of the few redeeming things of his Wars.
Yeah, it's just Doom is a character that I think people often use as a tool without understanding what they have. And it's so funny because whatever foibles you may give to Stan Lee understood that character really well.
Yeah.
Well, I think part of it is like the whole thing about Doom is like Doom is the embodiment of hubris, right? And I mean, that's something that, like, if any of us are honest, we have way more problems with that than we were willing to admit. And I think that's one of the things that, like, Stan knew that Stan was an ass, right? And I think because I mean, like, he wrote J. Jonah Jameson as a pastiche of himself, right? As like, these are the things that are broken about me.
I can see that. That's cool.
And so I think he was willing to admit his faults. And I think because he understood his own leanings toward that, he used it in his marketing and he used it in Doom.
I think Doom's a little more than hubris. That might be just my fanboy
Doom
peeking
is a
out.
reflection of the flaws of the Fantastic Four.
It's funny you brought up Shakespeare. I always like to say that Doom is Macbeth in power armor.
You know, now I want to take the Macbeth from Gargoyles and make him into Dr. Doom.
That's well. The thing is, though, is Macbeth is also hubris.
No. Yes, that is fair. But I think that he's more than hubris. He's got more than, and that's
true.
Right. He's not just a walking pile of hubris. He has very noble goals and aspirations. It's the hubris that brings him down.
Yeah.
And the temptation. But there's more to Macbeth than just the hubris. So I think it's fair to Doom has a lot of hubris, but right, exactly. And not mutually exclusive concepts, but I think when Doom is written very well, they give him the hubris as a fatal flaw and make him tragic, but then also give him a lot more to work with. And those are my favorite versions. And the people who write him well tend to be the ones who can write him with that. And the ones who write him very poorly are the ones who go, "Oh, he's just a hyperbolic, over-the-top villain who talks about himself in the third person." And they just write him as a cartoon character.
Well, and I think people have to remember that, like he's a villain, but he is loved by his people.
Well, I mean, he's created a utopia for them, and all you have to do is surrender your free will.
It's debatable that he's a villain, in my opinion.
I think he's a villain outside of Latvia. That's the question.
Part of it is that he's had such a long history because he's played on the side of the Angels enough times to be as much of an anti-hero, or even more so than like Magneto, who gets to be an anti-hero now.
Yeah,
that pisses me off so much that Magneto gets to be an anti-hero. That's just his status now. He gets to be a villain occasionally, but he's basically, moved into anti-hero territory, and they let Doom flirt with anti-hero. And then some idiot will just get a hold of him and go, no, Doom's just the cartoonish, over-the-top villain. And it's just like, kill me.
The problem with Magneto is Marvel has lost the script on the X-Men since the 90s.
Yeah, that's a big factor.
They have no idea what the X-Men are about anymore.
That's fair.
But back to Vagrant Queen, the other thing is the chief villain, who is the henchman who eventually becomes the top of the pyramid of power in the evil empire. He's a toxic male, but when he becomes the dictator, he's running as an ANCOM dictator.
That's all a
facade. That's all a facade for him to just, be cartoonishly evil and use absolute power to strike at his enemies.
Well, yeah, that's because that's what anarcho-communism is.
Yeah,
because it lies about the nature of humanity.
Yeah,
so it doesn't actually exist.
I'm assuming it's a pretty safe assumption to say that Mags Fazaja was not trying to write a critique of Marxism.
No,
Well, no,
I'm
that's
sure
her
she wasn't.
subverting expectations. Is you expected her to, have that guy be the space Nazi, but he's like going, no, I'm all about you, about, progressiveness and openness, because he was saying all of that while he had a mind control device to make everybody agree with everything he said.
Hmm. Yeah, it just seems overworked, I guess.
Yeah,
And yet
yeah.
the hero isn't. It's not.
It's
not
both
like a character-driven-
overcooked and undercooked at the same time.
Yeah. The character at the center is undercooked.
And your
Yeah.
first opening line with the character is her struggling about doing a good catchphrase. That's your opening introduction to the
Oh, no.
character.
That's just Brian Michael Bendis disease.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little
And
Zack Snyder.
whenever
maybe.
there's action, they don't show you the action. They do a freeze frame of, oh man, cool action's gonna happen, and then they don't show it.
That was probably they're running out of budget.
Yeah.
No, that's totally what they were doing. Totally what they were doing.
So here's a question: was that like I don't? I'm barely remembering the comic enough to see if there's any relationship to that in the comic, or if that's just a.
Well, I
quirk
mean,
of the-
why would you remember the comic? Because it only sold 800 copies to stores.
Well, yeah, like I said, I got a free comic. I don't remember it.
800. That's basically effectively no one reading it,
Hmm.
except for you. Apparently, you read every single issue.
Well, I mean, I skimmed through the issues when I watched the show because I was trying to find out if, come on, was the comic worse? And no, the comic was actually better.
Oh, good.
Because
I guess.
Mariko Tamaki was one of the people who helped Mags write the TV show. Yeah.
Hmm.
So
Spreading the wealth.
we were supposed to talk about today.
Hey, we did. We talked a little bit about it.
Very little bit.
This is probably and I was supposed to help guide the discussion. I've been a complete failure and a disaster, as I have a comic that's completely unrelated to what we're talking about on screen. As we
true.
talk about things that are completely tangential to our main topic.
That's
Well,
true.
we're right now totally 100% in the jazz.
Yeah. So for those of you people who are interested, this is a comic story I wrote, and Brian Lusang, who's on Twitter, did the art for it. And this is I like it, but it's available electronically, technically on our website, but I've never had anyone try to buy it. And I'm going to be building a Gumroad store in the next couple of weeks to try to make it a little more accessible, because our web store does not work as smoothly as I would like over on idealcomics.net. But yeah. That's we did that back in 2007 is actually when this went to press. But
So it's got this really kind of Batman-esque vibe going on with it, but the punchline is worth it. It was very well constructed.
Yeah. I was actually we built our universe to kind of mirror the progression of superhero comics of the 20th century. So this particular story is set during the Pocket era, during the dark age of comics.
Makes perfect sense.
And so that's part of why it has that. There's it's a humorous story, but there's also this edginess that's like I'm kind of poking fun at the edginess.
Oh, is that why the first story feels really golden agey?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yep. Because we tried matching those things along with the time frame. So
Gotcha. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
yeah, and so even our characters, Golden Age heroes, have a Golden Age like feel to there's a little more silliness, there's a little more free form to it, even though there's still some high stakes. They don't necessarily pan out in the same way.
You mean like that comic book I was supposed to get 3 years ago at Chick-fil-A?
Oh yes, it was. And that's one of the things that appealed to me about the concept of it is I was like, hey, I'm doing something like that.
I need to try. I without being a mean, I actually do want to ask Mitch if he frequents Chick-fil-A, because it's so uncanny. the connections.
That-
And once you see them, you can't
Wow.
unsee them. Like, okay, it's like red and white coloring. It's a rooster themed hero, and if you look at the logo for it, it's just like a Chick-fil-A logo. Like you just won't. It's
no.
yeah.
But I mean, Chick-fil-A is delicious.
Right.
It is.
And it even gets more than that, because when you look at the marketing for Allegiant Arts, they're trying to market themselves as like this top tier quality comic book. So they're trying to do what Chick-fil-A does with food, but with comics. So like
And you know,
even the marketing for how the books, like the materiality of them, it's very much reminiscent of Chick-fil-A.
and you know, if I had gotten this book 2 years ago, I might have bought some books from Allegiant Arts.
You know what I got? I got the 3 issue campaign thing they did
Mhm.
maybe a year and a half ago. Did you guys back that?
No.
The whole
No, because I was waiting on my Chick-fil-A tie-in comic book.
Yeah, I didn't have my chicken book.
Mm-hmm.
I bought
Yeah.
mine at Walmart.
Like, I was interested in buying Nora's story, but then I said, yes, but he's not gotten you your chicken book yet.
Yeah.
I like Blake Northcutt, even though Blake is now, in a good punk rock way, has sold out to the man,
Yeah.
and more power to her.
She officially hates you. That's
No,
been
she doesn't
documented.
actually.
Oh, good. Okay.
I last time I talked to her, she needed my help because there was somebody who was stalking her on Twitter to try to rat her out to DC.
Sorry. So
Oh,
earlier in
yeah,
the chat, they were talking about you were talking about Vagrant Queens. And Star Storyteller said so. It's Steven Universe with the lesbians.
That's just Steven Universe. That is correct.
No. Steven Universe periodically had interesting things, like the time that Steven realized his space moms gave him a fake test, so he demanded a real test, and they faked it, and like he snuck in and saw them all talking about how terrible they are as parents, and like, you know, it's like going, wow, they're actually aware of how awful they are.
I'm sorry. Did you just admit to watching Steven Universe?
I've watched large hunks of Steven Universe because there are moments where the show was very watchable and very interesting, and then it went into terrible places.
I took notes on the art style, with the backgrounds in particular. Like it wasn't like before, like Tumblr art was memed and coined. I mean, they did some really neat stuff.
So I
backgrounds
always thought I watched Steven Universe in the beginning.
Yeah.
And then I realized, wait, they're terrible parents. They're doing terrible parenting techniques. This is actually something they're commenting on. And then it just started getting into some bad things. And we can also get into the fact that is a popular theory on the internet that the Stephen Bomb distribution model was designed because it wasn't actually a popular show, but it was to create a fake sense of popularity so that they could keep selling the show.
It has enough popularity in some fashion. I'm not sure how much.
Basically, the theory is that Cartoon Network realized if they actually showed it like a normal show, the ratings would crater.
Oh, so they needed the marketing for it to be what they. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I see what they mean. Yeah, that can make some sense.
That's
You
the
need
theory.
it to be I think it's really smart to make your show into an important show, quote unquote. If you can market the show as important, it doesn't have to be good. It will, you'll be able to sell ads around it.
And
sure.
you know what is really important is when your main character at the end of the show turns into a giant pink male sex organ and is hugged by all of his female relatives and told it's okay, and then a white fluid erupts from the top of his head.
That didn't happen.
No, that happened.
Oh god.
That totally happened in the final episode of the sequel series to Steven Universe. And then Steven realized that he needed to go work on his life, and then he went off to college somewhere. The end.
Wow.
So I would rather talk about like anything At all.
No. Like,
Oh my god.
we can talk about something else at all, but like when I watch something like a Steven Universe, I do that to learn where they go wrong, where there are good ideas that could have been built better,
Sure.
and then I think,
Sure, but
How would
I can kind of like preempt you there. Where did they go wrong? The beginning, the end. I'm good.
well, I mean, Rose Quartz, they should have always known Rose Quartz was going to be the villain.
Okay, sure, but like so the only thing I know about Steven Universe really is what I've watched from ER's review of it, which is amazing, by the way. If you've not seen it, I highly recommend it.
Like all of ER's reviews are amazing.
Yeah, exactly. But his review,
Yeah,
he's
who's that?
he is a
semicolon
YouTuber.
R.
Yeah, E semicolon R.
Hmm.
He's a YouTuber. He does really good snarky reviews of things.
Mhm.
I'll type it in. Yeah, I'll type it in chat. It's kind of hard to. Yeah.
Also, Easy Peasy does an excellent review of Steven Universe.
Oh, there's no way I'm
its
gonna.
fans.
There's no way I'm gonna watch another review of Steven Universe. The one was enough. But like the very beginning of it, they're talking about the creator. What's her name?
Rebecca Sugar.
Yeah. Okay. So first off, we have a problem. We have a character whose name is Rebecca Sugar. So I mean, we've already gone wrong. But then Rebecca Sugar basically creates in her world building. She wants to basically, the word we use in academia is coding, but she wants to code sexuality into a children's show and basically slip it past the censors. So she creates this concept called, is it fusion that she basically creates?
Well,
and so she's able.
Isn't the only thing she does for gay coding.
But so she's able, but it's not just gay coding, it's sexual coding, because she's able to basically create this entire universe where the characters merge with each other.
But
and then she has the
for emotional relationships at the same time as it's also a fusion about sex and it's also about gender.
Right, but to boil it down, you basically watch. I am not going to pull clips of this. And yeah, Evie got me. Yeah, it's E semicolon R. Sorry, but you'll watch a scene of these two, supposedly androgynous, but they're basically female, creatures, and like they basically start, doing like foreplay, and then like suddenly merge in a very sexual, colorful explosion. That's like, oh, it's not sex, but it's basically
except
sex.
for the time where it was a rape allegory.
What exactly? So it's just like.
And
Where did Steven Universe go wrong?
It's not about,
everywhere.
Quitless, listen. Didn't you just say there is anything you'd rather talk about, and you're still talking about this?
Or also, how about the time that Steven and his dad fused?
Okay, so I'm blaming this all on Larry. It's Larry's fault. I've been triggered, and I'm going down a very dark road.
Quitless has no self-control.
Nope, I do not.
Steven Universe.
Hey, we could talk about how terrible the new She-Ra is.
I did not watch that one.
Oh my gosh.
Here's the thing is, I can't talk about any of this stuff because I have no idea. I don't watch any of that crap. I'm too goddamn old to care.
Okay. All right. So, So, as supposedly leader of this discussion, I'm going to take control, even though I don't have control because I know self-control, and so I'm going to get diverted by like a stick that Larry's going to throw in like 10 seconds. Like I'm apparently like a cat. You jangle something like shiny in front of my face, and ooh. So countdown about 30 seconds. This will go derailed. But in theory, we should share some art from. It's Kyrie, right? Did I pronounce that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. Point for me. So Kyrie, we should probably put some art on screen so that we can.
You mean like the two copies of Kyrie that are immediately behind the host's head?
Yeah.
Well, let's do a share screen. So Matt, since you're like, do you have any of the art we could put on screen so we could talk about that a little bit?
Yes. Here we go.
In the 5 minutes we have left for this discussion before I get
we
derailed.
Got a little bit more than 5. We got a little
If Matt wants
we only have
share.
5 before we all get distracted again.
Oh wait.
So what's the magic number of how we're doing? As of right now.
Almost $5,400. So that's pretty good. So that's over 4K in the black, which is fantastic. So
I'm sorry. Did you do a racism?
yeah, absolutely. 4K in the black. The rest is brown.
Okay.
And No
And
white
hey,
space.
look,
No
look at
space
that
for white.
look at that really awesome art there in the middle. That's featuring Asiatic Japanese influences there.
Yeah, we did.
Actually, that art's really good.
I'm just trying to get over, like,
Yeah,
when
she
did
did a great job.
when did The Witcher enter the story?
Yeah, right.
Well, you see, I would say it's Elric.
You're gonna pull that. You're gonna pull the Michael Moorcock did it first.
Classic. Yeah. Well, he so the concept for the art styles was the more forward and the closer we get to our period, the more realistic the art gets, and the cartoonier it goes back through time towards my art style in the 3rd century. But also it kind of plays with that, like how clear is our sense of I don't know, like if you could go in a time machine and you went back in time, like maybe reality would start to feel less and less real, I guess, in that sense of
More mythic.
yeah, right, yeah,
Like, a Sikh dude stabbing another Sikh dude with a bladed weapon.
hmm yeah, and that's 1880, so that's Larry's phenomenal story. So we've got some Sikh Lancers who go AWOL, and they're going to try and reestablish the Sikh Empire in the Punjab. And there's an artifact in an Afghan warlord's tomb, which they're leaving Her Majesty's service to go and reclaim it. And so Dr. Watson and then 2 characters from a Kipling novel, The Man Who Would Be King, have decide to go and try and stop them before it's too late.
Yes, this story is a double prequel.
Yeah. So that's the Ashcan. That's part 1 of 2, and we've already made commitments on. I think it was on Critical Blast. We said that we would. Next campaign I do will be part 2, so people get that quickly, which will be nice. And yeah, like it's fun, like because the market we're kind of cornering with Kyrie is it's fun with history and kind of playing with, like, here's these historical periods, but then there's treasure buried beneath that period, and then there's stories beneath that treasure, and there's kind of layered history going on. So I thought, an anthology is a great place to explore that.
What's the unifying thread for all of these?
It is this character here. She's Myra. She's the female character in the books that I draw.
Mm-hmm.
And this is set a bit after the events of my books. And she's dealing with the fallout and the consequences of what she's about to do in the book. So you kind of get like foreshadowing from the future kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And she goes traipsing across from Palmyra, Syria, to India, and ultimately to Japan. You're picking up on moments in time that kind of ripple down through the ages, and then other people and Dr. Watson has to deal with the consequences of the treasure hunting, the monster hunting that she's done. There's a Leninist admiral who's trying to take advantage of some of the things that she's done, and some Japanese counter-revolutionaries in 1904 who are trying to stop that from taking place. And then all the while she's training up her next. There's a kid in her ward. It's a Palmyrene prince who's the son, the one and only lost son of Queen Zenobia, and she's gonna teach. She's gonna show him the ropes, basically. From and we're seeing a bit of that origin here, and then we're gonna get some more in part 2 if we get to do that. So
cool.
So that's yeah. And we're having fun, and the object of the Ashcan that's being sought after is this Dakota ring / cipher box, and we're getting that 3D printed. And I'm hand painting it with a cool patina. It's got Myra on the cover, and you can use that to unlock 25% off future Kyrie campaigns. So that's kind of cool. It has a practical benefit, but you also get the hold in your hand, part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Wow.
Just trying to expand that whole, every campaign is a story, right? You're telling there has to be a clear story to the campaign itself, and so we're just trying to turn up that, amplify that adventure quest sort of variety pulp genre that is kind of underexplored, I suppose, still at least on Indiegogo, and I think it can be done. So we're just laying another brick in that wall.
Yeah, I love that you have this very well, I guess, intricate and connected cinematic universe, essentially. And with these and with also these paratextual elements, like the Dakota ring and so on. So it's a lot of depth, a lot to sink your teeth into, and I think customers do enjoy the bigness of something like that. Scale.
Well,
that's the English major word I should use.
Thanks. I guess, yeah, I think that's something I've learned from hanging out with fans of mainstream comics over the past couple of years is what that really means to you guys, growing up with that and following it over the decades, and what that universe, what it looks like when it's done well and when it's not done well. And, I'm just used to single creator kind of following a linear storyline, to a conclusion until he dies, and then there's no more books.
Mm-hmm.
But here's a question though: is Valerian at Loreline really a linear story?
That's a good point. Yeah, I think
yes, you can technically construct a linear story out of it, but it doesn't really work as a linear story.
Well, yeah. Well, I even think you could say that Tintin has that because of the authors, because of Hergé's growth as a creator over the years. I feel like this it's like I don't know. You're probably going to see that in any creator's vision. You probably see it in Matt Reese's stories where stuff he wrote 20 years ago is less grown up than the stuff he's writing now. So I tend to wonder if you just kind of inevitably you build that in where it's kind of like there's a canon. You should probably read it in this order because then you can watch maybe the accidental growth even. But Lorelei. I mean Valerian. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a shame.
Tintin grows more than Valerian does, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a shame though that Valerian at Loreline had that movie, even though there was really one movie that was more of a spiritual version of that previous, and that was The Fifth Element.
Yeah, it really died. It was a stillborn birth, wasn't it? Because it's such a fantastic comic and it's really fertile.
And honestly, they should have adapted the first album, which would have been much easier to have made into a movie.
Yeah. Well, it's like the Tintin movie from 10 years ago or something.
Oh, I like that movie. Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, well, it's like maybe that one was more successful. It was fine to me, but it also tried to pull the trick of let's look through the albums and let's see if we can do an homage to every major work, I guess, where we can kind of make a single narrative out of 5.
They moviefied it. Yeah. I think it was, I think the Tintin movie was, I remember watching it. I remember it had a decent reception.
The problem is Tintin isn't as complicated as late and middle Valerian. Like early Valerian isn't overly complicated because they only do like a couple of jumps in time. Mm-hmm. And also, yes, there's a wizard, but we're not going really in depth about the wizard. But it gets like really super surreal towards the end, and that becomes really a challenge.
Mhm.
I have not
Mhm.
read Valerian yet. It's on a list of things I would like to read, but I have read,
Oh man.
I have read Tintin, and I have read some of the Blake and Mortimer, which was, the
Oh great. What'd you think
Yeah.
of that?
I read the Yellow M. It was really good. It was everything that I loved about Tintin, but it had a
Yeah.
little. I think the only thing that
It's grown up. Yeah.
it is, and that's to its benefit and detriment at the same time.
Mhm.
So, Star
It's-
Storyteller, what's interesting about the Sikhs there is it goes back to Amadurani, and he actually had a connection to the Sikh Empire where he stayed there as a guest in their custody for
Yeah.
a while.
That's all the real history.
Yeah. And we did a little alternate history tweak here or there.
Yeah, because the Sikh Empire kind of died off as the Afghan and Persian empires kind of built up in the 1700s,
Mhm.
and Ahmad Durrani is kind of the founding. He's kind of like the best. Well, like he founds a dynasty, and he. I'm told that they still sing like songs about him in epic poetry and stuff. So it's kind of cool to. We're visiting his mausoleum here. It's something that we try to do with all these stories, and Matt helped me with the Japanese one too, where you take something that's interesting from history that isn't as well known, and there's some holes, there's some gaps in that history, and then you fill the gaps with fiction.
Yeah, and that's what I love about alternate history stories is you get the chance of like saying, because you get to and Roy Thomas did this in All-Star Squadron back in the 80s for DC Comics, where he took real comic book history, where comics were published quarterly, and real life history, and interfolded them together, and then told the stories between the issues of All-Star Comics and between the issues of whatever.
That's
and
cool.
It was crazy researched a reference too, because like he would refer to like Robin would guest star in an issue of All-Star Squadron, and it would have a editor's note about which issue of Detective Comics he's referring to.
Oh, that's cool.
So if you have the old microfiche, if you had your library had the microfiche copies, or if you had reprints or whatever, or you had whatever, you could go back and find that story that he's talking about. And it was
Now, was that when they introduced Iron Monroe as the son?
That was after that.
That was after that. Okay.
Because Iron Monroe was after the Crisis, the Young All Stars, and he's kept doing the same bit with those characters, but it was because the Crisis happened, and so he didn't get to play in the same sandbox. So he went through and created the Young All Stars as replacements for the DC characters he couldn't play with anymore. And
That's cool.
And so that was, and the crazy thing about it too is like, it was fun. I love the Young All Stars. But the one wild thing about his take on that particular retcon was that his whole Thomas's whole conceit was that time changed at the point he'd gotten to. So for the Thomas canon of All-Star Squadron, it's Superman until Spring of 42. And then after Spring of 42, Iron Monroe takes all the Superman roles, and everybody remembers it as being Iron Monroe, but it was really Superman before.
And for those of you who may not know, Iron Monroe was the grandson of Hugo Danner, who was the first, arguably, comic book archetype character in pulp novels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
By the way, I thought you guys would appreciate some Southwest Indian martial arts.
Yes.
Kalari Payatu, I think.
Yep.
It's kind of a cool period. That's what the Indian short story is we're trying to celebrate. Each of the assassins have a different martial arts weapon from that period, because I guess India, from my understanding, India was slowly kind of in that area. They were kind of devolving into lots of different tribal kingdoms from a, as a central power is kind of falling apart. And so all these people kind of there's gang warfare kind of showed up, and then they built up martial arts as a result to keep everyone safe. And they came up with cool belts that were also whip swords and mace warfare stuff. And that's kind of what we're doing. That is what we're trying to. So each of these guys are fighting with those different weapons, which is cool. So, yeah. What's the other one? Yeah. And they're all fighting in houseboats, which is the other thing about Kerala, India, which I think about at least. So, what were you going to say, Twitless?
I was going to say something that was terrible, and so I reconsidered.
Oh.
Yeah.
So this is a record. We've stayed on topic for at least 10 minutes. I'm very proud of our panel.
Well, we stayed on topic because we did need to cover some of that. We've been on the jazz for quite a bit. We've hyped up the audience.
Although I did notice that Larry still managed to sneak in Valerian there for a few minutes.
Well, we were talking about European comics, and
it's all good.
I really loved The Fifth Element. I found out that Valerian was one of his major inspirations. It was like, oh, cool. I read some of the comic books online. I said, this is going to be awesome. And then I saw the movie going, oh, you did too much. Oh, I'm so sorry.
I have not seen the film either. But
so let me give you the basic overview of the first album as I remember it. So Valerian is one of the space police. He goes back in time to go after a bad guy. He has to ally with a plucky local girl to get the bad guy and complete his mission, and he takes her back with him to have her becoming a space police person. That's what I mean where they should have done that album as the first movie. Because you have your audience viewpoint character, you also have the fish out of water, you have all the things that you can make a good movie with so long as you have good solid casting, and you don't have a lot of stuff that, you go to a Luc Besson movie to see lots of really interesting visual things that you've never seen anywhere else before, but that's not how you want to introduce somebody into a movie universe.
Yeah, it's just the way things work in Hollywood, though. It's such a crapshoot.
No, that was in Paris. That was 100% European production.
Was it?
Yeah.
That surprises me. I thought that
done
it was
entirely on the strength of Luc Besson's reputation, which got decimated, and his production company went bankrupt.
Oh,
well, in Hollywood, he would have failed upwards. So at least in France, when you fail, there's some consequences. Oh geez, the way things work here. Have you seen Kevin Smith talk about Wild Wild West and the Superman movie?
Hey, they got that spider in that they were wanting all that time.
But Kevin Smith tells this story about how this guy was started off as a hairdresser. And he just failed continually upwards until he was basically the director of the Wild Wild West film. And I think before that they were consulting with him or something for a Superman film.
Right. No. The executive producer was trying to get Kevin Smith to do a Superman movie, and one of his drop dead requirements is that Brainiac had to be in a giant metallic spider.
Right. Oh, was that because they'd seen it on Wild Wild West, or
no? This was before Wild
Wild West. Okay, so I'm getting my.
So when Kevin Smith saw the spider in Wild West, he said, "Well, you finally got the spider you wanted."
That's right. Yeah. That's the story. Yeah, but it was just the fact that this guy just continued to basically fail upwards until he was wasting millions of dollars.
Well, that's my point.
It's I'm a failure and I can waste millions of dollars. Why can't I?
That's one of the things on Twitter the other day. Nick Mueller posted a question. He says, what's the best way to get people to look at your work? And I said, well, my plan is to convince other people to let me write their characters and then steal their fan base away.
Like a pro.
I'm here to aid you in that quest. Can I just say that the director of Wild Wild West successfully
convinced Will Smith that he should take that role rather than Neo in the Matrix.
Lol.
That takes a special.
Yeah,
Although-
it's a special
although-
kind of failure.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure it would have worked for him as Neo in the Matrix.
Well, yeah. I mean, he got to do Men in Black, so I kind of feel like him in the end of Men in Black was his Neo impersonation. So.
Speaking of the Matrix, has anyone read Berserker with Keanu Reeves?
I've
No.
certainly read the treatment for the first episode of the Berserker Netflix series.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well put. So yeah, I've read the first 2 issues. It's and it kind of connects with what we were talking about with the crowdfunding thing, because is it the most successful Kickstarter for comics? I think it's up there.
No, it's up there.
It's up there.
Technically, I think Sluggy Freelance still made more.
Order of the Stick
Wow.
did a really big one too.
Yeah.
And so did Icarus and the Sun.
I actually
Oh,
got
yeah, that
Icarus
was-
in the Sun, and I really respected the art, but it had that young adult story that made me go, but why though?
Yeah, Order of the Stick made 1,254,000. Good lord. And how much did Berserker make? Just for Berserker did. So I know it broke 1 million. Actually, no, they beat Order of the Stick 1,444,000. They beat almost a million and a half.
Yeah.
So it's definitely up there in one of the
But-
most successful crowdfunds.
My problem with Berserk is they didn't do some of the interesting ideas that they teased at visually. So one of the ideas is that they wanted to have fun with Keanu memes and immortal Keanu Reeves. So they should have done
Really?
more of that in the story.
Yeah, that seems like a real missed opportunity.
Well, the other side of it is the fact that because I was on a stream the other day and someone really just had the best advice because it's going to be a 12-issue arc. They kind of said, I think the best way to experience this story is in its collected trades, because only 2 issues in, it's really hard to judge it because the story is definitely taking its time.
I mean, is it
And it
going to
has-
be in the trades or in the 10 episodes that are going to be on Netflix?
Well, I mean, we'll see, but I mean, that's the thing is we only have the first 2 issues, and the first 2 issues have yet to establish the story in a way that's really a story. But it's definitely
he's
it's
Wolverine
definitely
with slightly less good powers, except for when he takes the pills to make them really good.
it's definitely a roller coaster of action violence, and so if you're up for a roller coaster of of violence, it's definitely got everything you need.
And it stars Keanu Reeves.
And it stars Keanu Reeves. But what's hilarious is the pitch for it, because Keanu does the pitch video for it. Hold on, I can share this. This is something that needs to be seen.
Yeah, doesn't he? He just says like, so it's a comic.
Essentially, yeah. But
They asked me if they could use my likeness.
your Keanu impression's on point.
But it's like I was talking to a friend of mine who's a scriptwriter about why they can't make a Highlander movie. And that's one of the dumbest things ever. And I said, look, if you're going to make a Highlander movie in today's environment, get all the actors who've had the immortal versions of themselves as a meme, and you make them background characters who are immortals who cut off their own heads. Could you imagine a scene where
Cool.
Keanu Reeves takes the head of Nicolas Cage in a Highlander movie?
That would be amazing.
Reese, I'm sharing screen. Let me.
Okay.
Actually, hold on. Hold on. I need to unshare it. Give me a second because I forgot to share sound. Hold on. Share audio, and now I did it right. Competence, ladies and gentlemen.
Best
Okay.
show on the internet.
Yep. Okay. Super professionalism. Here we go. And any second now.
Comics are awesome.
Oh gosh.
Aren't they though?
I quit.
Berserker's got everything that you want from a comic book. It's got great drawings, colors, great story. It's got action, has a little romance, and it's about something.
It's about something.
Pause for a moment.
Oh, so did you say pause?
Pause. So, like, it's about memento mori. That's what the comic's about.
Mm-hmm.
So I was not memeing when I said I agreed with Keanu. It's about something. He legitimately, that's his pitch.
Gosh.
I was not kidding.
He's
All right.
working with DARPA to have them show him how he can die.
That is correct.
And I was like, well, I used to collect and I love comic books. And they were like, so did you ever want to make a comic book? And I was like, yeah, this idea of a kind of Viking, someone in a altered state, someone in a higher, heightened state, just out of control. Someone out of control and being compelled or driven to this thing and time like this. Kind of hiding in violence. This kind of character trapped who, in a way, has to, with this curse that it's compelled to violence, he understands the cost of it. He finds life precious even after all this time. And I feel with Berserker, we have some masters doing the drawings, masters doing the color, master working with me in the writing. And the story that we have to tell, I think, is a lot of fun. So check it out. If you do, I hope you enjoy it. Berserker, Boom Studios.
So that is the pitch for Berserker.
And after the first comic book sold in the stores, they announced the Netflix is in pre-production.
Right, and there's an anime they're doing as well.
Yeah.
It was just it cracked me up to hear the very beginning is just the perfect meme where he goes, it's got everything, it's got pictures, it's got words, it's got a story, it's about something. It's just like he basically broke down everything that a comic is to its most like platonic elements. There's call back to earlier.
That's amazing.
Speech bubbles.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then he makes $1.5 million.
But I think Boom had an idea, and they pitched it to Netflix, and Netflix said, we got a side deal going with Keanu. What if we combine these deals? We can get some money to actually get you the budget to really make this pop.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't want to speak too badly on it. Again, so far it's been a roller coaster of action and violence, and that's fine. I just hopefully substance will happen in the story by issue 3, which again I think because it's so, Larry, you're right. It's so paced like a show, like a movie, that I think that the trade would be a much better experience because you'll get the whole cinematic thing in one go as opposed to fed to you in little chunks. So,
or you could wait for the Netflix deal, which
or yeah,
I'm
we could
sure
just watch the show.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's definitely still a lot of life in crowdfunding. Apparently, you just got to get a big Hollywood star behind you.
Yeah. I think it's such a weird, risky, kind of Wild West experience out here in the frontiers of crowdfunding that I do think there's always going to be this popularity with folks like these who get, these celebrities who can take you like very safely into that world, and give you a very secure adventure, I guess, outside of like, in the sense of like, you're going to get your comic like in that safety sense,
But
like,
I mean,
I'll support a Keanu book, but I won't support,
Chick-fil-A.
some weirdo on Twitter.
But like, hold up. We're in the space where like we are all like 1 or 2 people away from having a legit contact with like Booker T from professional wrestling. Would you make a Booker T comic, Matt? Either Matt?
Would I make a Booker T comic? I don't know. pay attention to wrestling, so I couldn't.
I wouldn't try and force him into my I mean, the short answer, absolutely yes. But I'd have to like think about how to meet him, you know, to do the equivalent of what they did here. You know,
Because like
you don't
Booker
try
T
to
has
make
legit
Keanu.
been on Ethan's streams.
That's true.
Oh, he has?
Yeah, he's legit been in the stream for Ethan Van Sciver's streams.
Well,
Wow.
I guess I couldn't then.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so back to Kyrie.
Yeah.
No.
As I chase my own tail like I'm on Adderall.
I will say, since we're on the subject of it, I would desperately want to put Mr. T in a comic. I mean, I know that's happened before, but I want to do it again.
Yeah. I mean, there's something to that, you know. There's a lot of ways to build safety. It's safety in a very positive sense, you know, safety into your campaign. And celebrity is one way to do that, though sometimes that it doesn't always work out, but people tend to trust a celebrity over Joe Schmo.
Well,
for better or worse.
For me, it's not just about the celebrity pull. It's legitimately like I think that there's a for growing up, you know, as a kid in the 80s, right? I mean, Mr. T's got a place in my personal history.
Yeah.
I mean, that American Cyborg wasn't that what it was called? Comic about the cyborg gymnastics team. They kind of reminded me of the Mr. T cartoon a little bit.
Yeah, I saw that actually. And
what was that? Cyborg USA?
Yeah, Cyborg USA.
Yeah. I dug that. There's a couple of comics I kind of wish I had. That one was so weird. I kind of wish I had backed it. But yeah,
all right.
There's some weird ones out there.
So, what I challenge you guys to do right now is pitch your story from Kyrie, or pitch Kyrie just in general, and beat Keanu at his own game.
Okay.
So let's see if we can beat his pitch. I think the bar is set sufficiently low enough that we can all do this.
Okay, I've got a thing. I'm going to jump ahead of the queue.
Please.
So here's the ticket. So, Kyrie is a world where the legends are true. It's a world where magic is a property of the universe. It's a world where the myths come alive.
Okay, writing that down.
That's it.
Really good.
All right, that's good. That's a good
The
start.
myths are true. Yeah.
But get into your specific storyline as it connects to that.
Yeah. So here's the thing: is there's in real history, the first empress of Japan was Himiko or Pimiko, depending on the dialect, right? And she was surprisingly, she united the tribes of Japan under one rule, and she was a woman, and that was unheard of in the fractious epic before she came to power. But when she came to rule, like nobody saw her for ever. She just would rule by sending edicts out, right? And apparently,
this is all true, by the way. This is all in the Japanese history.
Yeah, and apparently she did have some sort of advisor, but nothing's known about this person. So, and yes, Star, Mr. T's Sunday Thoughts are amazing. So, what the story that Matt and I worked with is, well, what if the advisor was some sort of spiritual entity, something like a dragon. And so that's the starting point about the history that goes into this. And then fast forward, 1,000 years, and it's the Russo Japanese war. And there are suddenly you're in the middle of Japanese defectors and Russian agents, and it's a spy thriller on a train in the background of a mythic retelling of the Himiko legend.
Awesome.
Yeah, I like it.
You might want to, if we were to do an elevator pitch, we might want to trim it up a little bit. But
yeah,
but it's. I think it's. I hate picking on Keanu, but I think his zoom in all in one take pitch needed a second take.
Yeah. So the Kandahar crisis is about Dr. James Watson recounting to Sherlock Holmes a story about two men, two troublesome and turbulent men who are the type of men that are necessary for the building of empires. But men who are necessary in building of empires end up becoming problems. So this is how Dr. Watson and these two troublesome, turbulent men dealt with some other turbulent men who were causing a problem for the British Empire in Afghanistan, in the graveyard of one empire where another empire was on the precipice of rising like a phoenix from the ashes.
All right. It's got some mystery. I might need a few more details, how it connects to Kyrie a little bit. Or
there's an artifact that is necessary to get into the tomb to get the diamond nose piece, which is going to be used as a symbol to show that the Sikh Empire can rise again in this time of troubles as the British are consolidating their power in South Asia.
Okay.
Yeah. It's kind of a play on the Koh-i-Noor diamond.
Yeah.
Which was being bandied about. It left the Punjab, went into Afghanistan, went to Iran and such. And that in the period of the characters in the story. So we just kind of made a fictional version of that. And,
yes. Because when the Koh-i-Noor arrived in Europe, a lot of people were kind of underwhelmed with it. And Queen Victoria was also not really happy with how she got a hold of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you guys do better pitches than I do. I'm really glad. I was able to work with you guys.
Just go with Keanu. It's got
everything. Yeah, I was gonna say
it's got words, it's got drawings, it's got color.
It's about something.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you think that my drawing style is kind of weird, well, I found people who draw better than me. But if you like my colors, and a lot of people like my colors, well, I'm coloring it. And if you like the universe, you like my writing style, I'm either writing or co-writing these things, or finding people who are better at figuring out a lot of this stuff than I am, as you can see here. And we're trying to build to expand, so we'll just see how far this universe can go.
Now, another important element, just want to put one more thing about my story I forgot to mention. So Kipling's characters were in a story where he was very tongue-in-cheek about elements of Freemasonry. And as a Freemason, it was important to me to be tongue-in-cheek a little bit with some of those elements to put that little bit of flavor in this story as well. Right. Without obviously getting me in trouble with the Grand Lodge of Florida, because I don't want to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, Dr. Watson canonically, as well as the Danny and Peachy of The Man Who Would Be King, were both Masons. So it's in The Man Who Would Be King. That's how they get Kipling himself to go along with their plan. So they get Dr. Watson to go along with them by
a similar means.
Yeah. So it's fun. We're having a lot of fun, as you can tell. There's a lot of the stories have beginning, middle, and ends, but there's a lot of room. There might be at least one cliffhanger, and there's room to grow it. So, and you get a decoder ring, so no one else is doing that.
That's
and
true.
You can put something in your decoder ring. We're not putting any judgment of what you put in it.
Yeah, there's already a lot of dibs on storing your weed there, which after you buy it, it's your decoder ring. You do what you want.
I feel like that should be the entirety of your pitch.
Yeah.
This is the comic that comes with a decoder ring that you can store your hash in.
Yeah.
Well, especially since big chunks of the story take place in India. I mean, that seems maybe appropriate. I don't know.
Mm.
I like that.
Yeah.
For future Wild Tales of Carrier, I was thinking the other day, like, we need to do something with, like, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid somehow.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I
And
mean, I love
something in
westerns.
Marrakesh.
Oh, but it's set there. Okay.
Yeah, like, actually, that's a great idea. Two cowboys go to Marrakesh.
Oh, that's fun.
Hmm.
Well, good thing we're in the black because we can now fund that.
Yes, you're in the diverse.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Matt Reese, thank you for hosting this.
Yeah.
Of course, man. Of course. This is my usual Thursday night thing, as I started the show with. So next week, Matt's coming back, and we're having #1 Marmaduke fan on to talk about theology for 2
Oh, are we gonna do it? Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. You guys both said yes. I'm planning on it.
I didn't know if we had a topic. That's funny.
And Matt, if you want to rope me in here, you could rope me into one of these so long as I got free time.
Cool.
This was
Cool.
fun. I had a good time.
Well, yeah, I try to do that. So
It's been
Yeah,
real.
that's
I don't think I'm going to be allowed back.
no, of course you will. Of course you will. So, but yeah. So, yeah. Marm is the best. Although he's not. He did lose last weekend. He had an inglorious defeat there outside of Lincoln. So
Yeah, to the viewership of thousands, apparently. He
Yep.
kind of memed himself. Did you
Oh my
guys see there was
goodness.
some sort of meme about the Josh Wars or something?
Yeah.
In Milwaukee or somewhere, and Marmaduke was in the middle of it. Somehow he was like Reddit posting his way to stardom in that.
Yeah.
We'll have to ask him about that.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about that next week.
Yeah.
So it was insane. So anyhow, that's the story. That's the thing. It's just we're a little late today. Running a little late, but that's okay. It's okay. We've talked about all sorts of stuff.
Lots of
We'll
good
go-
jazz was played.
Absolutely. We'll have to it's where the smart people hang. That's not entirely true.
Have we been watching the same stream?
It's my show. So
Okay. I've been here.
anyway, so we're going to go ahead and call it. Hey. Neil gave a quick pitch of his stories. That's a really succinct one. I like it.
Yeah.
So okay, I'm going to call it though, because I'm going to go do some stuff. But Matt, I do have some questions for you. So if you don't want to leave right away,
Okay.
but
Hold
Hey,
on. I have
You
to-
sold me a comic, by the way, so thank you. Thank you, whoever that was in the chat.
oh, cool, excellent.
I'm attributing that sale to Matt Reese.
Well,
So
thank you.
thanks.
So okay, guys, but we're going to call it. And next week, tune in. So or not. It's a free horror country. Do what you want. Have a good one.
Theology debate.
A theology debate.